All right, so what I'm doing, what I have is I'm just gonna do a video on my phone. It's just gonna be of me. I know they won't be able to see you for this project, but they should be able to hear you just fine.
Okay, great.
Let me turn the volume up. And um, welcome. Thank you for taking the time to do this. This is an anthropology project that I'm doing on culture and sustainability in DC
Yeah.
and the greater DC area. So you were you. I met you when you were working at a restaurant in Georgetown. And one of the things that we often complained about was how dirty it is, how there's rats everywhere, and how none of the businesses there are pretty, sustainable in the least. I mean, they
Yeah.
economically they're not sustainable for
No. No, there's nothing sustainable about them.
yeah. I just have a couple informal questions about sort of some things in that vein. I know one of the things is you grew up on a farm in Southern Maryland, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken. And one of the things you said when I asked you to do this interview was that you knew nothing about sustainability. So I'd like to argue that you actually do.
I've got a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things I'm interested in is agriculture. So that's also another reason why I'm doing this. And as you know, I grow mushrooms, gourmet mushrooms, and medicinal mushrooms, and that's one of the things that I think is really cool about urban farming is a growing, thing, especially in DC. I am trying to start a business with that with my mushrooms, and I know that you, with your experience in agriculture, just by lived experiences, enough to give some sort of give a unique perspective on that.
Yeah.
So my first question is what do you think in DC are some of the biggest problems with sustainability?
I think DC has the same issues that a lot of other cities do. DC a little bit less so in some ways. Like there's still like a great amount of kind of wildlife here in the city. You go to New York, you go to Los Angeles, and I mean Los Angeles is a fucking desert, but like I mean in New York, it's a city. It's incredibly urban, and you get really removed from just nature, and I think that's a dangerous thing for people. To just be around plants, like watch them grow, and also to help them grow and to feel sorry about that noise. But to be able to get like the sense of autonomy that you get from growing your own food, and knowing that no matter where you are, whether you're in a city growing out of a planter that's hanging outside your window, or if you're in the middle of nowhere, you can grow and support yourself in that way.
Mm.
So I think that's something that you kind of lose when you go into urban areas. But there's also a lot of really wonderful initiatives right now happening around DC. I really should add the names of some of them, but like like small community farms and community grow spaces
Mm-hmm.
that not only grow for their community but also donate food to the homeless as well as people who are actively protesting social issues.
Yeah, there's actually a couple of community gardens just near my house, between me and Wyatt's house. It's a
Yeah.
mutual friend of ours, and he's actually another one of my interviewees later this weekend. And There's the Glover Park Community Garden, which actually was started as a victory garden in World War II.
Oh,
And
incredible.
supplied a lot of food for DC and this area, not only just this area, but pretty much the whole city during that time, during the food shortages. That was kind of like a national movement, not just with America, but also Australia, England, a lot of the allied nations during that time period started this movement of being more autonomous, being self-sustainable in a way, and growing your herb and vegetable gardens. They obviously didn't want people, raising livestock to be self-sustainable. That's a problem in itself. It's part of the reason why Tenleytown now is fully developed and not a farmland or dairy pastures anymore.
Yeah.
I used to be, that's a fun, interesting fact about DC. Tenleytown, which now is, major part of DC, it used to be dairy pastures, and that used to be a major income for a lot of people in this area.
I was actually just talking to my parents about that the other weekend. We were talking about how there used to be like what was it? It's called like white gold or something like that when they managed to start making like whipped cream.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think Wyatt talked about that too when he was going on one of his runs and found that milk bottle.
Yeah.
Town pasture or something like that. I can't remember.
Yeah, definitely. I'm definitely going to ask him about that in our interview more to talk about that more, because that was a really interesting find. And he's found actually a couple of different old, bottles in the woods in DC. And that also brings me to my next point, which is I don't know if you're familiar with the area of the Glover Archbold Park where Wyatt and I do the Wyatt's Nature
hikes.
Videos.
Yeah,
those nature hikes, which are really fun. And that area, I'm putting in my report as part of one of the good and also bad parts of DC's sustainability efforts, in that it's like a semi-natural forest, but there's a major part of the DC sewer system runs under it. So there's a lot of pollution there. There's a lot of like seepage, and there's trash everywhere because it just comes off the street, runs down through the gutters, and people just don't care. So that's definitely one major flaw in trying to keep up the parks and maintain them, keep it nice for everyone and keep the ecosystem healthy as well. And I just wanted to see if you had any familiarity with that, part of DC's, infrastructure.
As far as the sewers and the way that they affect the ecosystem,
and if you have any perspective on how that might affect not just the immediate ecosystem, but also the larger community of DC and its surrounding areas.
I think that it creates like kind of like a dangerous like psychological effect on people when you look around and you see nature just covered in trash. There's an effect that happens on you where it's just sort of like, this is my environment, why bother cleaning it? And I think it can create a defeatist attitude that makes people just want to give up. It also, like keeping the world around you clean and also feeling attached to the land in a way that is not related to property. Like there's always people being like, oh yeah, this is my land, but they don't care for it. They care about owning it.
Right.
Whereas land doesn't have to belong to you for you to feel connected to it. Like the place where you grow up, that you don't have to own any of that, but you just, by taking care of it, by being surrounded by beautiful land that is well kept, it's good for the mind. Creates a sense of ease. And I would really love to see people get like more into maintaining and cleaning and keeping spaces healthy. I guess the best way of putting it, for both the land and the people who are on it. But when you also look around and you see all of that sewage, those chemicals, the trash, the plastic, all of it, there's no part of you that's just sort of like something that I could eat could grow here.
That's actually interesting that you bring that up. I have so I've been foraging for mushrooms sometimes in that area. You're not supposed to. It's a national park, and you're not supposed to take things. I know, but it's fun to just find one or two mushrooms, identify them, see what they are, and it doesn't really harm the ecosystem. It actually helps it by spreading spores. But I have a friend who looks for some like edible plants in the area, and she will eat some of them. Like she's made stinging nettle soup before, just by finding stinging nettle out in the woods along the trails and stuff like that. It's an edible plant. There's actually a variety of them that she's shown me out in the Glover Archbold Park, I'm personally very hesitant to consume anything that grows there.
Yeah.
She's fine. She hasn't had any health problems. But I personally would not want to do that.
Yeah.
I have thought about taking spores from some mushrooms there and culturing them at home and growing them out. I did that not with one that I found in the park, but one that I found growing on a tree by in between Wyatt and my house by the side of the road.
Yeah.
And I successfully did that, and that's a really great way that you can show that sustainability in a city is possible.
Yeah.
And there is biodiversity in cities when people think there really isn't.
Yeah.
And DC really has some of the greatest biodiversity that I've seen in any city.
It is so incredible being down here. Just, I mean, everything that just like happens in nature around here it's just so remarkable. Like you really get the full 4 seasons, and I think that also makes it possible for just like a wider variety of plant life to have a presence here. That was one thing. Like in the West, it's boring as hell. It's the same thing. Like it's either there's no trees or it's the same tree.
Yeah, palm trees.
But out here, it's just this immense explosion of life everywhere that you look. Like the greenery is just always impressive, and that was always one of my favorite things about coming back to DC. Was being able to kind of explore this environment that is both deeply entrenched in nature and also urban at the same time.
Yeah. I really think that DC's layout does a nice job of bringing nature into the city, but also maintaining the separation between the two.
Yeah.
And I think my last question regards more like sort of like the political aspects. One of the efforts in sustainability has been more in sort of psychological or emotional sustainability in trying to decriminalize natural entheogenic plants and plant substances. And they've shown a lot of benefits psychologically, emotionally for people, and even physical benefits too. One of the things that is interesting is that these a lot of psychedelic mushrooms can be grown at home, and many people already do. The problem is that these people face jail time, legal fees, and all of the repercussions that come with being arrested for something that's really not it's not necessarily a victimless crime. I'm not going to say that, but you're not harming anyone directly. It's not a violent act. It's not harming a corporation, unless you see it as harming the pharmaceutical corporation and taking their business away from them. But I think my personal view is that people should be able to consume what they want if it helps them and doesn't hurt them or anyone else. And I just wanted to see what your view on that was.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I mean, especially when it's something that you are growing yourself. And I think with education, like tied into anything, it can be made safe. I certainly understand why it could be concerning. Someone just growing a bunch of mushrooms, not knowing anything about it, and then just eating way too many.
Yeah.
And then dangerous effects coming up, and I certainly like that could absolutely be the case. Where it's just like a young teenager finds mushrooms and they're just like, I don't know how many to eat. I'm just gonna eat all of them.
Right.
It's just a bad time.
Yeah, there's also problems with identification. I mean, you don't want to eat the wrong mushroom.
So it's just like I think that education should be as important as with anything else with that. I do not think that it should be active criminal. Like I don't think there should be the severity of consequence should not be as extreme as it is. And also it's just like, why not just give people licenses to grow it, and then just hit them with a small fine if they are caught growing it without a license.
Right.
possibly seize the goods. Like, I mean, like, just there's so many just less extreme ways to go about it, and I think just healthier ways. But I mean, like with all that, like this is the way that I look at most things. It's just like, I mean, if someone's intent is to hurt someone else, then there should be a punishment for that.
Right.
For anyone else, you know, I don't think anything that's like a small fine is necessary.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, you know, it's just like it's ridiculous. But I think that kind of also feeds a little more into like a conversation about like, you know, the prison industrial system. But I mean, absolutely, like, you know, it's just like I think people should just be educated, and if they're educated on growing a psychological mushroom, they should absolutely be able to grow it. There could be a test, like, you know, like just to get a license. I mean, it's, you know, nothing extreme, nothing crazy, like just simple things to make sure that people know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So also that way that, you know, like there aren't any bad badges going out to people.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's the same principle with getting like a card for medical cannabis or getting a driver's license. I mean, you want to know that the person who is using this thing that they have a license for actually knows, that there might be some risks to using it, and that they're aware of this, and that they just know that they're, being mindful of what they're doing.
I also think it should be important to note that like the licensing process should not be expensive.
Right,
like that's another part of it, because like then all of a sudden it becomes this thing where, sure, like like it's legal to do, but you have to pay $2,000 to get into it.
Right.
Whereas, like it's just, if you know what you know, like you're good to go.
Right.
Pay $50, get a license, move on.
Right. And I think my last question would be in regards to that movement trying to decriminalize entheogens under Initiative 81 in the District of Columbia. What do you think some of the impacts on just DC culture in general might be? Like maybe the art scene, music scene, bar scene. I know you've been a bartender for a while. Do you think that maybe legalizing mushrooms would cause a decrease in people going to the bars? Kind of maybe sort of like they saw in some states that legalized weed?
Yeah. I don't really think that it would shift anything too drastically, one way or the other. Like I think that different type of mushrooms have wonderful benefits for anything. Small doses, are just a great way to combat depression and just a bunch of other things. But for the recreational use of it, even just casual recreational use, like, it's a journey. And that's not something that you really want to do all the time. It's something that you kind of want to meditate into and give yourself a space for.
Yeah.
And really allow yourself to dive into it, so that way you can kind of come out with something as well.
Yeah.
So I don't think that would really have an impact on the bar scene or anything like that. I would hope that it could encourage young minds to dive a little bit deeper into philosophy, psychology, their experience with their own ego.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest things, is, for some people it's very hard to get to a space where your ego quiets. And certainly for a number of reasons. One, it's so extreme for both genders, but whether you're trying to overcome like a toxically masculine ego, or part of your ego that has been assigned value from a toxically masculine society, to just be able to kind of like hit pause on that for a second and step back and just go, why am I feeling the way that I am feeling right now? What are some factors that are creating these extreme feelings within me? Mushrooms and other hallucinogens can help with that. But once more, you have to know what you're doing going into it. So I would be very curious to see. I don't think there would be any negative outcomes from legalizing mushrooms in DC. Obviously, like, don't drive while you're on them.
Don't drive when you're under any influence.
Substance.
Yeah.
So I really don't see any negative outcome from any of that.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, I think I would agree with you definitely on all fronts. But I think that's going to be it for the interview. And I would like to thank you for taking the time to speak with me today. And yeah, that's
Dude, it
it.
was great. Yeah, thank you so much for bringing me in on the project. It's awesome. It's also awesome getting to see what you're kind of doing with the schoolwork right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to